Ok, disculpe que no podría hacer esta charla en castellano, pero seguimos en inglés. So, I'm going to tell you a story about open government in the United States from 2009 to today, because it really has been during these last 3 years that open government has gone from an idea to a reality, and I would say even a pretty ubiquitous reality at the local, state, and federal level in the United States. And it really began in the beginning of 2009 with Barack Obama's inauguration, where he issued the Open Government Directive, and which called for the U.S. federal government to be transparent, participatory, and collaborative. And so this was certainly about publishing information from government, publishing government data, but it was also about getting citizens involved in government and having them participate, voting on which questions to ask Barack Obama live online, for example, in the White House open for questions. Also publishing all of the data about what government spends money on. In particular, in my field, information technology, there's a great effort to help people understand where we're spending money and where we might be wasting money, not necessarily because of corruption, but simply for lack of understanding about when we're spending money on a project that is going off track and becoming wasteful. At that time, I was hired as the Chief Information Officer of the New York State Senate. So if you could draw a line between the White House as maybe the most highly regarded government institution in the US to the worst, the New York State Senate would be over here. The New York State Senate really, in many ways, looks like this picture out of 1965, which was the last time that there was a change of power from one party, political party, to the other in the New York State Senate. And it was an institution known for being corrupt, in fact. The former majority leader of the New York State Senate had recently been convicted or arrested on federal corruption charges for running a business out of his Senate office with taxpayer money. Another senator had recently been put in jail for assaulting somebody in his family. So this was not a very good part of our political system in the United States. In terms of their technology, this was their technology for news. Every morning at 5:30 in the morning, people paid with our tax dollars would go and cut out newspaper articles out of the paper and distribute them to each of the senators' offices, and this cost us about $1.5 million a year. This is our computer system for managing the information about citizens, about voters, for senators. It really looked like technology out of the 1980s. And this is our website, which looked maybe like technology out of the 1990s. So I was hired, and I brought in a bunch of people who really had never worked in government before and had never really wanted to work in government before. And I was given the mandate to basically do the same thing they were trying to do at the federal level. And so we relaunched our website using the Drupal software, the same software that the city of Buenos Aires now uses for its website. And we made sure that all the events that senators run are available online and as data, so that I could put it into my phone, I could put it into my Google Calendar. But most importantly, I knew when and where somebody was meeting with someone else about making a law, the laws that I live under as a citizen of New York State. We made sure that all of our data about every dollar we spent, every dollar that I was paid in salary was easily accessible online as well. We made sure that all of the proceedings of the Senate were live streamed so that I didn't have to travel 2.5 hours anymore from New York City to Albany to know what was being said on the floor of my legislature. And we made it easy to find all these things. We tried to make it as easy to find out about a bill that was being debated in the Senate as it is to use Google. And of course, we made it easy to find it on Google as well. We also asked for citizens' comments. We asked for your input, for your feedback on bills so that senators would actually have more information as they went into the process of deliberating a bill. And it was the first time that a legislature had done that, the very simple process of asking for comments on a bill before they have to vote on it, but online in a public shared forum. And of course, we made it easy to share this information in the places that many of us New Yorkers spend time with our communities and interacting with our friends on Facebook, and made sure that all this was possible wherever you were, even if you weren't at a computer, so that you could do it from a phone wherever you were in the city. So we think we did a pretty decent job of making the institution more transparent, and that was a mandate that we had going in, was make this very corrupt institution very transparent. But somewhat to my surprise, but it's something that I care deeply about now, I think the biggest result was not transparency. I think the biggest impact was actually something you might think of more as innovation. And innovation in two ways. One, we think we made the institution more efficient by making more information available to more people more easily and by saving money doing it. Because of the approach we took to developing technology, including using open source software, we saved about $1 million a year off of what had been about an $8 million technology budget. So all these great transparency motivated things don't necessarily need to cost money. In fact, if you do them right, we believe, and we had an example of actually saving money doing it. We also got many more New Yorkers who previously hadn't been involved in the political process in our legislature involved on YouTube, involved on Twitter, involved in voting on what ideas they thought should be proposed as new laws before they had even been proposed by a senator. So why do we do all this? I alluded to it before, especially at a time, as we had in the United States, in particular in 2009, 2010, of falling government budgets, when we have less money, less tax dollars to spend. That tends to correlate with the time at which citizens need government the most. They need government services when the economy is bad. So that's a problem. Government has a bad budget, less money to spend, and there's greater need for it. The only answer to that, I think, is to innovate. We need better government, and we need to spend less money doing it. So in New York City, we took a fairly similar path. There initially was a law that was proposed and ultimately passed, primarily with the advocacy of groups focused on transparency. So a very similar motivation in New York City as in New York State. That became law. We put the city's data online. It's an ongoing process, but it really is the most comprehensive open data effort of any major city in the United States today, the NYC Open Data Portal. But again, while the motivation initially was primarily transparency, I think the impacts have been primarily about efficiency and innovation. For example, restaurant inspection data is now online in the Open Data Portal, and the New York Times has mapped the restaurants that have good hygiene, good sanitation, and the ones that are not so good. And developers have developed an app that you can put on your phone that will warn you if you sit down to eat at a restaurant that has a bad inspection, so that you know before you eat what perhaps might be not at a good place. So this is citizens being empowered with government information. Similarly, government has been empowered with citizen information. This is a severe weather map where if there's a blizzard or a hurricane in New York, I as a citizen can go in and report, hey, there's a blockage at my intersection, cars can't get through. And the government will find out about that sooner than if they had to monitor that themselves. So this information flow is really a two-way street between citizens and government. The availability of this kind of data about government operations has also made government more efficient. So in this case, I believe it was Wired Magazine, took data about the issue reports that citizens have submitted to New York City and figured out what time of day, which kinds of problems are most likely to happen. So for example, the most noise complaints in the city happen late at night. So the city has a limited number of people that deal with noise complaints, but they were working mostly 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that isn't necessarily the best and most efficient way to deal with noise complaints when they mostly happen at night. And very simple insights like that come from making data available to people, in this case outside of government, who could analyze it, visualize it, and then propose ways that government could actually operate more efficiently within the limited resources that it has. In transit, we've got probably a dozen applications that are widely used by New Yorkers that have been built by entrepreneurs, by developers outside of government to help use the transit system better. And the city has really promoted this kind of entrepreneurial activity around its data. The Big Apps Contest is now in its third year, and it gives prizes to entrepreneurs, programmers who build applications that use city data that is useful to, and create applications that is useful to New Yorkers. And people are now building startup companies and getting funded by venture capitalists and creating jobs in New York City directly out as a result of winning this competition. And I think, very importantly, cities are now not doing this alone. This is not just New York City, this is Boston, this is Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, and cities are sharing these innovations with each other. We're building applications, we're putting them out as open source software, we're socializing them with our peers, and we're getting help, and we're getting feedback, and we're getting reuse of our software so that we don't have to reinvent each other's wheels or maybe even just buy the same wheel again and again. So as cities, we're really in this together. And just, I believe, 2 weeks ago, the cities.data.gov portal launched in the US, where cities are now sharing their data in an aggregated way. And this is really, to my mind, and I'm a little bit biased because this is my field, but I feel like this is now ubiquitous and, if not ubiquitous, inevitable that it will become ubiquitous in the United States. We have hundreds of cities that are following this kind of process for opening up their information and getting citizens more involved. And it really feels like it's going to become something that is not only expected, but demanded by citizens across the United States at every level of government. So just very quickly, I want to give a few sort of tips, if you were to do this in one of your governments, that I think that I've gleaned from my experiences in New York City and New York State. You need people that have been in government for a long time. You know, you might even call them bureaucrats and who knows how the status quo works. And you also need people from the outside who have fresh ideas and perspective and maybe never thought they would want to work inside government. And in my experience, you really want to put those people together on the same team, because both classes of knowledge, both cultures are really important to success. You want to put out a commitment about what you're going to do before you do it, because along the way there are going to be a lot of people and a lot of difficulties that you're going to run into that could stop you if you haven't made an explicit public commitment to change things. You want to adopt policies that are themselves open. For example, in the New York State Senate, we adopted Creative Commons copyright so that it was explicit that all the information we were publishing that was online belonged to citizens, belonged to taxpayers, and they could do whatever they wanted with it. There was no issue of a license or paying for that information. We wanted to adopt standards that are becoming ubiquitous for open government data publishing. You shouldn't have to make up your own or follow one company's set of standards. Like the internet itself, there are open standards for publishing government data, which I think are important to adhere to. Of course, we want to make it easy to share that data. We don't want it just in a PDF online. The software that does all this, as I mentioned before, I think is very important to share. We put all of ours in the New York State Senate up on GitHub. And we think that open source technology innovations that are really burgeoning in the private sector are really important to government. Open source software, cloud computer hosting, app stores, they're all extremely important. And it's important, we think, for government to invest in these civic entrepreneurs. There's really a movement of civic entrepreneurship, people doing work to actually help make society better. And with co-working spaces and investment funds in New York City in particular, they really fostered that movement. And then finally, it's important to have events like this, where we come together. We do a lot of unconferences and hackathons and these sorts of events for civic hackers in the US, which is really important to have this physical face-to-face convening so that we can share our lessons learned. And then I'd say probably most important of all, ask for feedback early and often. Too often in government technology projects in particular, we make a great, very detailed plan, and then 2 years later, we produce something, and that doesn't work anymore because technology is moving so fast that if you plan something and don't get feedback on it throughout the process of developing it, where you end up may not be at all relevant anymore because the rest of the world has moved on. And if you do all this, what I like to think of is a distributed innovation cycle that involves government, citizens, and industry, and where it's very fluid, where something that government maybe had to do last year, citizens can do this year. Something that perhaps citizens wanted last year, but government couldn't do, industry creates a solution for this year. And we see this very dynamic, rapid feedback loop happening now in the civic technology sector in the US. Or, much more simply than all this, be like Buenos Aires, because the Buenos Aires governments and the open government and digital teams here have done an amazing job. They've really done all these things. And it's really no joke that in the US we look to Buenos Aires now as a model for how to do a lot of these things right. So thank you very much.